Everyone, in this video we will focus on 4 common terminologies in epidemiology: endemic, epidemic, pandemic, sporadic, and then an outbreak. Okay, let's begin with epidemic. When we say an epidemic, what comes into your mind? When we say an epidemic is when there are more cases of a particular condition or disease than expected in a particular geographical area. Okay, so a practical example is, let's say if in Ghana, usually we expect, let's say, 5 cases of malaria to occur in a month. Okay, let's assume in a given month, if we happen to record, let's say, 100 cases, then we can say malaria has become an epidemic in Ghana. Okay, so for example, if we take a particular condition and in a given period, let's say a month, we usually expect 5 cases of that condition to occur. And for a particular month, we are recording 50 out of the 5 that we usually expect, 50 compared to the 5 we usually expect in a month. Then we can say it's an epidemic. The condition has now become an epidemic condition. Okay, so when we say epidemic, more cases than expected for a particular condition, more cases than what is expected. Okay, good. A typical example can be, let's say, cholera. Let's say you come to Greater Accra region of Ghana. Let's say we usually expect, let's say, 50 cases of, let's say, cholera across the whole region. Okay, in a particular month or in a month. Then in a month, we are recording, let's say, 1,000 cases. Then we can say the condition has become an epidemic. Okay, so epidemic is when there are more cases than what is expected. Now, the next terminology we look at is pandemic. Now, pandemic is when an epidemic is occurring across countries. Then we can say it's pandemic. So, for example, let's say a condition like COVID-19, during the COVID-19 era, COVID-19 was a pandemic condition. Why was it a pandemic condition? For example, if you take Ghana, for example, we do not expect to record more cases of COVID-19 in a particular day. So we are not expecting to record even more than 50 cases of COVID-19. In fact, COVID-19 was not something that was in Ghana. Then suddenly, you are recording 50 cases of COVID-19. It means in Ghana, COVID-19 has become an epidemic. But then if that situation is occurring across countries, different countries, then we can say the condition has become a pandemic. So when an epidemic situation is going on at the same time for a particular condition in multiple countries or across countries, then we say it has become a pandemic. The condition is a pandemic condition. Okay, now the next terminology we will look at is endemic. When we say a condition is endemic, meaning that condition is constantly present in a particular area. So when we say a particular condition is endemic, meaning it is constantly present in an area, it is always there. A typical example is if you come to West Africa, malaria is an endemic condition in West Africa. It is always there. Malaria is always in Ghana. Then we can say it's an endemic condition. It is constantly present in the country. Endemic. So if you come to Ghana, for example, malaria is an endemic condition. Okay, it is always there. Is that okay? Then the next terminology we will look at is sporadic. In epidemiology, when we say a disease is a sporadic condition or a sporadic disease, meaning it occurs occasionally. Okay, it occurs at irregular patterns. So, for example, let's say there is a particular condition. Let's say in the month of, let's say at the start of the year, let's say a particular condition. Then someone would suffer that condition in, let's say, Ashanti region. Now, in 5 months or let's say in 6 months' time, then one person would experience that same condition in, let's say, a different region, somewhere in, let's say, Greater Accra region. Now, in a year time, so you see, from 4 months, then the next person suffered in, let's say, 6 months' time. Then let's say in 2 years' time, then someone also experienced that condition. Then we can say that the condition is a sporadic condition. So you see, even the interval of occurrence is not fixed. Okay, the interval of occurrence is also irregular. And the area of occurrence too is irregular. Okay, such a condition then we say is sporadic. You can have a condition that is sporadic in West Africa. Let's say a particular condition. Let's say in 2024, one person would experience it in Nigeria. Then in 2025, someone will also experience it in a different country in West Africa. Different country. And the interval of occurrence is also not fixed. Okay, let's say someone experienced it in January. In 3 months' time, someone will experience it in, let's say, in Ghana. Now, in 8 months' time, then another person will experience it in another country. So you see, the frequency is not also constant. Okay, it's irregular. The interval of occurrence is irregular. And sometimes even the number of people who suffer the disease is also irregular. Okay, so for example, one person will experience it at Kumasi. In 6 months' time, it will happen in Greater Accra. But then 2 people will experience it in Greater Accra. Now, in a year time, then it will happen in, let's say, Eastern region. But in Eastern region, maybe one person would also experience it in Eastern region. So you see, even the count of the occurrence, the number of people suffering is also not following the same trend. Such a condition, we call it sporadic condition. It's sporadic. Is that okay? In epidemiology, we say it's a sporadic disease. Is that okay? So, sporadic disease, we are talking about occasional cases. Is that so? A typical example, in Ghana, we have few cases of rabies yearly. Okay, so you can say it's sporadic. And, the occurrence is also irregular. So it can occur somewhere, strangely, it can occur in a particular region. In 3 months' time, you see someone reporting in a different region. Sporadic. Is that okay? Good. So let's go over. When we say epidemic, occurrence of a disease in excess of the normal expectation in a community or a region, often arising from a common source. Okay, so when we say an epidemic, and we even have in epidemiology, we have outbreak. Now, when we say epidemic is also the same as an outbreak, but usually we use epidemic when you are looking at a larger population or a bigger population. But we use an outbreak when you are looking at a smaller group. Okay, so for example, let's say a particular family. Okay, a particular family or a particular community or a town. Maybe there was a community festivity or a program. People attended the program. They all ate the same food. Then food poisoning, okay. All of them are rushed to the hospital. Is that okay? Within that community, we usually don't expect that number of people reporting with what? With food poisoning. So it will be considered as an epidemic. But in epidemiology, we rather expect you to call it an outbreak. Why? Because it's a smaller, it's limited to a particular area. We are recording an increasing number, but then that increasing number is coming from one particular area. So call it an outbreak. Remember that in epidemiology, outbreak and epidemic is the same thing. Outbreak and epidemic is the same thing. You can either choose to say epidemic or an outbreak is the same thing. But we usually prefer that you use an outbreak when we are looking at a smaller group. Let's say a group of people attended a wedding. They all ate the same food. People are being rushed to polyclinics or a particular hospital with food poisoning. It's an outbreak. But let's say a whole country, okay, in different regions, then people are reporting with, high numbers of a particular condition than we expect for that condition in that country or that region, then we can say that it's now an epidemic. But then if it's limited to a community, sometimes it can even be a family. So a particular family, they all took the same food, supper. Now, in that family, let's say if one person should suffer from, let's say, food poison, it may be something that is not considered serious, maybe normal. But then family of 10, 8 of them are having food poisoning. We can consider that as an outbreak. You can't call it an epidemic. You should call it an outbreak. Is that okay? Good. So usually an outbreak is smaller. Okay, but they usually use these terms interchangeably. Okay, then the larger one, the global one, is the pandemic. So when we say pandemic is when an epidemic is occurring across multiple countries. Then we call it a pandemic. So when an epidemic is occurring across multiple countries, different countries, then you can now call it a pandemic. Okay, good. So that brings us to the end of the video on these four terminologies: endemic, epidemic, pandemic, and sporadic. Okay, so sporadic is when a particular condition is occurring occasionally. Okay, so occasionally